Hi everyone, today's video will be talking about the consequences of shock therapy. In the previous video we covered what was shock therapy. Now we will be discussing the consequences of it. So it was administered in 1990s and mostly we'll say that we here are covering the negative side of it because it brought ruin to economies and it brought political crisis for people. So yeah, now it is divided into two main broad categories. I would say one is your economic problems and the other is your political problems. First, we'll discuss about the economic problems. The very first point is that Russia, which was the successor of USSR, which we studied, was a large state-controlled industrial complex, but it got almost collapsed because almost 90% of the industries they were put to sale to private industries and companies. This is the very first point, wherein within Russia the large state-controlled industrial complex got collapsed, as we see that 90% of the industries they were put to sale for the private individuals, to the private individuals and to the private companies. The second point is that all of these restructuring, it carried the market forces, which included the virtual disappearance of the entire industry. So the entire industry got disappeared, and that is probably the reason we call it as the largest garage sale in history. This point you need to remember very well because it can come in your MCQs, the largest garage sale in history. The third point is that the valuable industries. These valuable industries, because there was a shift from socialist system to a capitalist one, so even the industries which were very valuable, they were undervalued and they were sold at throwaway prices. Means they just wanted to give up on those industries, they just wanted to sell it whatever price you take. Alright. The fourth point. Now because of this, the citizens were also given the opportunity to participate. So the citizens were provided with the vouchers to participate, but they were sold in black market because the citizens needed money to survive. That is the reason we call it as a painful process of transition from an authoritarian socialist system to a democratic capitalist one. Fifth point. Now, Russian currency is ruble, and the value of this just declined dramatically. Because of this declination, there was the rate of inflation that increased, and so people lost their savings. Next point is that the collective farm system got disintegrated, leaving people without food security. In the previous video, in the shock therapy, we discussed how the collective farming was disintegrated and was shifted to private farming, bringing capitalism in agriculture as well. So as this collective farm system disintegrated, what was the consequence of it? The people went without food security. They did not have food to eat. Seventh point, the real GDP of Russia in 1999, when we talk about the GDP of Russia in 1999 was very less or below than the GDP of 1989, and so the old trading structures also broke. The eighth point is that the old system of social welfare that also was systematically destroyed. Yes, systematically it was destroyed. The systems which were there before for the welfarement of the society, they got destroyed systematically, not at once but systematically it got destroyed. Withdrawal of government subsidies. So government subsidies are there for what reason? The welfare of the society, so that they ensure equal opportunities, but as the resources were going into the private hands, so the government withdrew its subsidies, so the large section of population which was dependent on this, they went into the state of poverty and got poverty stricken. The 10th point is that the middle classes, they were pushed to the periphery of the society. What is periphery? So if this is the society, periphery is the borderline of the society. So they were pushed to the periphery of the society, and the academic and intellectual manpower, it got disintegrated or it got migrated. Mafia emerged. So mafia emerged, the mafia we all know. So they emerged at this point of time and they used to control many economic activities. Next, the last point here is that the post-Soviet state, especially when I talk about Russia, it got divided. So Russia, which when you're talking about the post-Soviet system, so it got divided between rich and poor. Now, I want you to take a moment and just get back to all the things, all the points we have studied We talked about the GDP of Russia, we talked about the currency, we talked how the mafia emerged who used to control the economic activities, we talked the division between the rich and poor, we talked about the largest garage sale in history, how the valuable industries were undervalued and they were sold at throwaway prices, the citizens were given the opportunity to participate by vouchers which they used to sell in the black market just because they needed money. The rate of inflation was high. The system of social welfare that was systematically destroyed. There was the withdrawal of government subsidies. The middle classes, they were pushed to periphery. The academic intellectual manpower just disintegrated or migrated. I just give you a quick snap of all of these things. What is common in all of these things? We just studied it before the start of the lesson. That is, they all are economic problems. The economic problems, the economic consequence of the shock therapy. But there is another dimension in it as well. That is the political problems. So now we will discuss what were the political problems when we study about the consequence of shock therapy. Before moving on, I would like to clear once again that this is just a one-shot revision of this particular topic, the consequences of shock therapy. We are not going into the detailed explanation. This is just that we are skimming through the contents so that we're able to revise it before an exam. The detailed explanation, if you need, there will be a separate video for this, but this is just a one-shot revision which you can have a look at to revise all the topics and just refresh all the points at just one go. Now when we talk about the political problems which was created due to the shock therapy, so what was there that after the post-communist regime, the constitution was drafted in a hurry. So there was very much hurry in order to draft the constitution. They just wanted to get done with it. So because it was drafted in a hurry, so they gave a strong executive power to the president. So there was a strong executive president. It had the widest possible powers it could have. Given all the powers, very strong executive. So this made the elected parliament relatively weak. So the people who got elected and then they used to represent the people in the parliament in front of the president, they would definitely be weak, right? So that was the scenario, especially in Russia, including Russia. So this was one of the political problems we're discussing about, wherein the constitution was drafted in a hurry and strong executive president with the widest possible powers that rendered elected parliaments relatively weak. So in Central Asia, the president had great powers again, and due to that they became very authoritarian. So let me give you an example to prove this statement and validate my statement. That is also what you need to do in the exam. Giving you example of two countries, Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan. So the president of these two countries, Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan, they appointed themselves to power for the first 10 years and then they again extended the powers for the next 10 years. Yes, the presidents of Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan appointed themselves to power for first for 10 years and then extended for 10 years. And the thing is, this is the power, authoritarian if I talk about, so they allowed no dissent or opposition. Okay, and the judicial culture was yet to be established. The independence of judiciary, the judicial culture was not there, it was just yet to be established. Clear? So this was about the political problem as a consequence of the shock therapy. Now in conclusion, most of the economies were able to revive, so they were still reviving in the 2000s, but yes, the condition was much better than before. And what can be the probable reasons for these? So when you see the landform and everything, what is common in all these countries is that they're mineral rich. Basically, there was the export of natural resources like the oil, natural gas and the minerals. Second, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Russia, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, they were the major oil and gas producers. In the other countries, they used to gain rent from the oil pipelines and some amount of manufacturing.